The story of Apollo 11 is well known. However, due to the large number of people participating in the project and the enormous impact of the moon landing, a few facts have faded into the background. Welcome to Tech Heaven, and in this video we'll take a look at some interesting things you didn't know about the Apollo 11 mission. Number 7. It took 37 years to verify exactly what Neil Armstrong said when he first stepped on the moon. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for humanity. According to the official recording, we heard that's one small stride for man, one great leap for mankind, minus the A. If that was the true quote, he made a grammatical error. He essentially argued that humanity took a small stride and a big leap at the same time. The shift in meaning is rather noticeable. Armstrong, for his part, persisted on saying it with A for the longest time. In 2006, a computer programmer named Peter Shanford decided to finally address the question. He downloaded Armstrong's tape and ran it through software that allows impaired persons to interact electronically via nerve impulses. He discovered a 35 millisecond sound bump between the words for and man, too brief for human hearing to detect, but long enough to account for the missing article. Wouldn't you think that 37 years to resolve this issue is rather a long time? Number 6. Michael Collins does not enjoy talking about the mission. Michael Collins, the third member of the Apollo 11 crew, did not join Armstrong and Aldrin on the lunar surface. Instead, he stayed in orbit for over 25 hours, circling the moon until it was time for the three of them to return to Earth. As a result, Collins often reflected on how lonely he must have felt. Understandably, being asked the same question over and over for half a century has left him irritated. Collins expressed his thoughts in a recent interview. It's a lot easier not to talk to a bunch of very smart, very motivated journalists who are going to beat me up one side and down and dig into my inner workings, Collins said. I was not lonely, despite some news headlines saying Collins is the loneliest man who has ever survived a lonely orbit in a lonely place. God, he was lonely. When asked what he intended to do next, he said, "I'm going to locate a great big rock and hide beneath it." Number 5. The American flag. Buzz Aldrin standing next to an American flag is one of the most memorable photos of the first lunar landing. Unfortunately, the flag was knocked over a few hours later when he and Neil Armstrong took off to return the command module. After pressing the launch button, Aldrin gazed out the window and watched as the rocket blast swept everything away, including the renowned flag. Interestingly, the remaining flags on the moon, which were planted there by astronauts who went far enough away to avoid being knocked over by the rocket blast, have all turned white. They have lost their red, white, and blue colors after being exposed to unfiltered sunshine and radiation for more than 40 years. Number 4. Unauthorized ESP experiments. Edgar D. Mitchell conducted several unannounced extrasensory perception tests during the Apollo 14 mission, unbeknownst to his employers in Houston or even his crewmates aboard the spaceship. Mitchell would focus his attention strongly on a series of symbols typically employed in ESP trials during the early hours of their sleeping time while traveling to and from the moon. He and a group of Florida doctors had planned the sessions in advance, seeking to learn whether ideas could be conveyed through thousands of miles of space. The findings were at best inconclusive. As it turns out, Mitchell and his Earth counterparts were most likely out of sync during the majority of the studies. For what it's worth, the findings were reported in the 1971 issue of the Journal of Parapsychology. By the way, if you're watching us for the first time, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you can enjoy our future videos while getting updated. Getting back to the scene, number 3. The moon stinks. The strong odor of the moon startled the astronauts who visited it. Of course, they didn't notice anything until they were back inside the lunar module, removing their spacesuits. The extremely fine powder began to settle everywhere, including the astronauts' faces and hands. Some of them even got a taste of moon dust. Being 4 billion years old and coming into contact with oxygen for the first time must produce a distinct odor. The stench reminded most of the astronauts of spent gunpowder, something they would have been familiar with from their military duty. What's the deal with that odor? That remains a mystery. Because the moon and gunpowder are not chemically similar, there are numerous ideas as to why this is the case. According to Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon smelled like wet ashes in a fireplace. Yuck. Number 2. The Apollo 11 crew had a peculiar way of pooping in space. In the case of space travel, traveling where no one has gone before also entails, well, pooping where no one has ever pooped before. According to NASA, the astronauts used a polyethylene bag that was tied to the buttocks to capture feces, which is a fancy way of saying that they had to piss in a butt bag. The entire procedure was an adventure. They had to remove all of their clothes, get as far away from their comrades as possible, and hope that everything went smoothly into where they were intended to go. They had to use their fingers to snap it off, as there was no gravity to help them. They had to then destroy the feces bacteria with a specific solution, seal it in the bag, mesh everything inside to make sure it was mixed, then clean everything up with wet wipes. But what happened when Armstrong and Aldrin walked on the moon? It does, however, get better. They were officially dressed in maximum absorbency garments designed for fecal retention. But there is no need for us to mince words. They were wearing space diapers, plain and simple. Surprisingly, how do astronauts poop in space is perhaps the one question Collins has been dying to hear his entire life. His response? Carefully. Number 1. The US President had an alternate speech ready in case Armstrong and Aldrin couldn't make it back to Earth. Today marks the 50th anniversary of humanity's out-of-this-world achievement. At the time, however, no one could guarantee that the moonwalking astronauts would return safely to Earth. Thus, in the terrible case that Armstrong and Aldrin were unable to return home, then US President Richard Nixon had a speech written by William Safire that he would have read. Collins had a better chance of returning because he did not join them on the moon. Here's the complete speech. Fate has decreed that the guys who traveled to the moon to explore peacefully will remain on the moon to rest peacefully. Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, these heroic men, are aware that there is no prospect of their recovery. But they also understand that their sacrifice is a ray of hope for humanity. These two guys are sacrificing their life for humanity's most noble goal, the pursuit of truth and knowledge. They will be grieved by their families and friends, by the nation, by the people of the planet, and by Mother Earth, who dared to send 2 of her sons into the unknown. They stirred the people of the world to feel one. In their sacrifice, they link the brotherhood of man more securely. Men used to look at the stars and see their heroes in the constellations. We do something similar in modern times, but our heroes are epic men of flesh and blood. Others will follow, and they will eventually find their way home. Man's quest will not be thwarted, but these men were the first, and they will always hold a special place in our hearts. For every human who stares up at the moon in the coming nights will know that there is some area of another world that will always be mankind. Fortunately, we were spared hearing Nixon read these words. And with that being said, it's time to end our video. What thing about the Apollo 11 mission inspires you the most? Let us know in the comments. Like this video and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos like this. We'll see you in the next video.